Language serves as a powerful instrument that shapes our perspectives of the world and influences how we engage with others. Over the past few decades, our communication styles have evolved significantly, especially in the way we refer to individuals with special needs or disabilities. Terms that were once considered acceptable may now carry negative or diminishing connotations, underscoring the need for mindfulness in our language. Traditionally, many labels that were used to describe disabilities were derived from medical or clinical perspectives, often stripping individuals of their identity and reducing them to just their conditions. Terms like the handicapped or the disabled were widely accepted but frequently reinforced stereotypes and contributed to this very stigma. The transition to person-first language, where we prioritize the individual before their disability, such as person with a disability, represents a crucial advancement in recognizing their humanity and dignity. Today, we understand that even a single word can have a significant impact on someone's self-esteem and sense of belonging. Language that is compassionate fosters inclusivity, nurtures understanding, and cultivates an environment where everyone can feel appreciated. By being intentional with our words, we can create a culture of respect that uplifts rather than diminishes. This awareness in our communication goes beyond just simple etiquette. It reflects our dedication to honoring the experiences and identities of all individuals. Hi, I'm Shari Bailey. In today's episode, Michael and I will delve into terms that are often perceived negatively within the special needs and disability community. We will propose alternative language that encourages empowerment. Updating our vocabulary to reflect compassion and respect is so important and ensures that our words unite rather than divide. By doing so, we not only uplift those that we're discussing, but also enrich our own interactions, contributing to a more inclusive and empathetic society. Hey, Michael.
Hey, Shari.
So let's talk about mindfulness, which is something that I described as I was going through the preface. How do you define mindfulness?
Well, when I think of mindfulness, I think of what it says, being mindful. Wasn't always something I've done as a young person, but as I got older and realized the world wasn't centered around me, I started being mindful of what I said, what I did, and I think you have to be careful to be mindful because a lot of times it's not about intention; it's about how your words or your actions may affect someone else. So I think when you ask me what does mindfulness mean, that's what it means. Being mindful that your actions don't always just affect you, but they could affect people that are connected to you or people that are around you.
I think that's a great response. And I look at the word mindful, but also the end part, fullness, right? And the fullness really represents not just from our own perspectives, but the perspectives of others, right?
Yeah.
So how can I be mindful in fullness of the community and those around me? So, I will say we need to start with a full disclaimer that there are some words that will be used in this episode that are often perceived as offensive. And we also believe that they are offensive, but they have to be brought up in order to have the conversation. So full disclosure in advance.
Yeah.
Before we get into some of the words that we've outlined that are absolute do not use words in our society, let's also talk about not just the words themselves, but also how we use them also matter.
Yeah, yeah. I think that's very important because just the simple use of a word could have a very dynamic effect. And that's the thing about words. Words uplift, but they can also hurt. And I think it's very important that we're mindful of how these words are used and the connotation that they're used in, which I think makes a big difference.
Absolutely.
You know,
So with that, let's think about one word as an example.
Okay.
The word slow.
Okay.
And I'll use this in phrases that I have personally heard before. Oh, that little boy is slow, so let him be at his own pace. Or, are you slow? When you're referring to someone that may not be picking up on something as fast as maybe other people. Using that as an example and kind of tying it back to what you just said around how you say it also matters.
Mm-hmm.
It's not like you're saying, "Oh, you're running slow."
Mm-hmm.
When you're using that word to describe a person
Mm-hmm.
in an adjective form,
Mm-hmm.
it's very offensive.
Yeah. And I think we have to keep in mind, okay, he's running slow. That's no harm, no foul, right? But when you tie that word to the mental capacity of a person, which they may or may not have control over, that's when I think it becomes offensive. Like, what are you slow? What are you acting slow? And so, in that example, you take a very simple word
Hmm.
that when a word was derived and the definition was attached to it, um, to now, based on the way you use it, it can become a negative thought. Like
Absolutely.
you're slow because when you think of, all right, I'm a race car. If you tell me you're a race car, you're moving slow. It's almost like an insult to my muscle of being a race car. So I think when people use you're acting slow, it's not meant as a compliment. It's meant to diminish
That
that
person's
person's,
character, ability. Yeah.
their movement, is just meant to diminish them in any capacity as how you want to look at it.
Yeah.
So again, I think it's very important how the words are used.
It is very important, and it's important that we teach each other that this matters.
Yeah.
So, some of the words that I would suggest in replacement of the word slow
Mm-hmm.
would be developmentally delayed.
Mm-hmm.
Because I think when individuals are referring to people as slow, while I understand that some people may not be acclimated with the special needs and disability community, so they don't have the experience. But
Yeah.
when you have an individual that has a developmental delay,
Yeah.
they may not be to the pace of what we deem normal.
Yeah.
So they may do things a little
So,
slower,
yeah.
but that does not make them slow.
Slow.
That is their pace. And I
Yeah.
think when we say developmentally delayed, we can then identify that there is a delay
Yeah.
developmentally.
Mm-hmm.
However, that person's pace is made just for them.
Yeah. Yeah. That's very important. That was a very good uh, concept of how you put that. Because again, it's all based on pace, right?
It is.
And I'll use myself for an example. I'm a chef, right? I'm a I'm a I'm a good
You're about
chef,
to put me on
right?
blast.
I'm a good chef. So if you go into the kitchen, right,
I'm not as good as
you may
you.
not be as quick, you may not be as skilled, you may not be as a number of different things. It doesn't make you a bad cook. It just means that if you put nuts on the same level, it's going to look
It's not
different.
apples to
It's not
apples.
apples to apples,
Right.
So that's I think that's crucial, and that was the point that even me, I've never looked at it like that. Like, yes, this person is developmentally delayed, but in their world, in their box, they're not slow.
They're not slow. I mean, I'll take it to Layla as the
That's a good
example.
example. Yeah.
Layla is now 10 years old.
Mm-hmm.
Happy birthday, girls.
Mm-hmm.
And Layla operates, I would say, in about a 2-year-old mode,
Yeah.
even though she's 10 years old.
Yeah.
Does that make her slow? No. That makes her brain able to work at the capacity of a 2-year-old.
Yeah.
And that's why we do things with Layla that fit her ability.
Yeah.
And it's about recognizing the ability and the pace in which that individual can operate.
Yeah. And I think these conversations, although at times they may be a little they're delicate and you know may not feel good, but what I've learned of I've never had a special needs child, you know, in my life and until Layla came, so it's like prior to this, when you don't know, you don't know.
You don't know. You
Which
don't
is
know.
why these conversations are so good, because sometimes in life, I don't go around thinking that you woke up to be a bad person.
Exactly.
You didn't get out of your bed and say, you know what, today I'm going to go to the grocery store and I'm going to insult every parent of a special needs or a child with disabilities, or every person who has a parent that may have a disability, or, any. I really don't believe, call me naive, I don't believe that people wake up to do that.
Agreed.
And a lot of times these things happen because there's no open dialogue. Like, okay, I understand you don't understand. Here's why I feel the way, and not putting on that badge of, oh, you're just too sensitive. No,
Exactly.
it's not so much about being sensitive. When you don't know, you don't know, and these conversations are needed.
Absolutely. And you gave me the opportunity to go right into the next word, which we often hear, and it's one of my least favorite words,
Mm-hmm.
just in general, not even around special needs
Mm-hmm.
community, just in general. I
Yeah,
don't
like the word.
favor the word. I was in the hair salon.
Mm-hmm.
I was getting my hair done, and the lady next to me that was also getting her hair done was on the phone.
Mm-hmm.
And she was talking to someone, and she was, I guess, discussing a child
Mm-hmm.
that they know.
Mm-hmm.
The child obviously has special needs
Mm-hmm.
or disabilities, from what I assumed
Mm-hmm.
through the conversation. And in that conversation, she's saying, "Oh, you're talking about that retarded girl." And she said it in the sweetest way, as if she said it like, "Oh, you're talking about that really sweet little girl."
Yeah.
But she used the word retarded. And this is, again, one of my least favorite words.
Yeah.
And right before this, we actually went on the Webster Dictionary.
Mm-hmm.
And even Webster Dictionary has a disclosure
Yeah.
that says this is considered a word to be offensive and outdated. So
Yeah.
even the dictionary has recognized that
Yeah.
this is a word not to be used. But by definition, it's intended to mean less advanced in mental, physical, or social development than is usual for one's age.
Mm-hmm.
So if we remember correctly, it wasn't intended to describe people. This word was originated to describe situations.
When you look up the word, and again, I'm like, yeah, I don't like this word. When you look up the word retard, it'll give you about 20 different similar words that are kind of mean the same thing: slow, delayed, um,
Late.
late,
Yeah.
things like that. And then way at the bottom, it'll say handicap,
Mm,
right? And so I think what has happened is just that word is so off-putting to me.
yeah.
And I think as a society, we continue to grow, we developed, we become compassionate, empathetic. So it's like words matter.
Words absolutely
And I
matter.
think that's kind of what we got with that word, because there's so many other words that you can use
Yeah,
in the place of
because
that.
you mentioned earlier tardy
Means
is
late.
it means late,
It's a
and
word.
it's likely derived from the
From
word
word.
retarded.
Yeah. Hmm.
And it wasn't intended to be used
Yeah.
to describe people. It was
Yeah.
intended to be used to describe moments
Hmm.
or circumstances.
Hmm.
But somehow it evolved to describing people. And when I hear that word, my body just
Yeah.
it just gets very tense. And even before I had Layla,
Yeah.
I did not like the
Yeah.
word. Now with
Yeah.
Layla, I
Yeah. Very
absolutely
sensitive to it.
do not favor this word.
And I think too, even, and again, I'm not a historian, but I do read. Um, if you go back, right, when the word was derived, we have to understand, even from a medical perspective, right, it was used to describe any person that did not fit in what we call normal.
Yeah.
So it was like a blanket word. But as the medical field, they
Advanced.
advanced and technology got better, it's
Yeah.
like, okay, this person
Has this
has this
diagnosis.
diagnosis,
Right.
this person has this diagnosis.
Right.
It wasn't just like, okay, they are the R word, because now you have so many different diagnoses in the society we live in now. So to me, which makes the word even more outdated because we have evolved in science and in knowledge.
Right.
So when you evolve, you got to get better. You got
Absolutely.
to get better. That's it.
So the intent of this episode is to provide suggestions. We will never offer a suggestion to be a synonym of the word
Yeah.
retarded.
Yeah.
But what I will offer is use the diagnosis. When you're referring to an individual, say, oh, you're talking about the girl that has this diagnosis.
Mm-hmm.
For instance, if it's Layla, oh, you're talking about Layla that has special needs or that has
Mm-hmm.
um, Jacobson syndrome.
Mm-hmm.
But don't also feel like you have to characterize that person either. You're talking about Layla, right? It doesn't have to necessarily come with the differentiating factor that Layla presents,
Yeah.
right? So just keep that in mind as you're exploring ways to
Yeah.
avoid using the word retarded
Yeah.
completely.
Mm-hmm.
You don't have to find a replacement word to
Yeah.
characterize an individual, but should you feel the need, like I'll take the lady in the hair salon as the example.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, you're talking about the girl that has special needs.
Yeah.
Oh, the girl that has that rare syndrome or whatever it is that you need to refer to that person as, but do not use the word retarded. It is diminishing, it is demeaning, and something that should be completely banned from our vocabulary.
And I think too, we have to keep in mind, right? And it happens. It happens. If you don't want to use the word special needs, I can almost guarantee that every special needs child has their something about them, right? Where we have to get into the habit of not letting that be their badge of honor.
Right.
You could have easily said the girl who wears the big curly locks,
Right.
or the girl who lives in the gray house. Or from the conversation, it sounds like she was very aware who she was talking about.
Yeah.
When the other person in the conversation, she could have said, "Oh, the little girl that has the two little brothers that climb my tree." It could be a number of things, but I think we take the easy way out. It's easier to say the little girl.
Yeah.
So that's another thing. It's like if I'm walking down the street and you see me, you're not going to say, "Hey, the fat guy."
Right.
You might. I don't know. If I'm just joking. But it's so many different things you can use to describe an individual without in the special needs community without making that the badge or that's the first thing that you see. And again, I think all that comes from making people aware so that now they're comfortable. Where it's like I'm afraid to say anything, so I don't say anything. I'm afraid to interact, so I don't do anything. Because at the end of the day, they're people.
Exactly. And it touches on what you said earlier
Mm-hmm.
about just awareness and education.
It's key.
And like I said, I don't think this lady meant any harm in the way that she presented the word, but the word itself is extremely harmful. And it's about raising that awareness so people are mindful
Yes.
of the language that they're using so they can find another way to articulate what they want to say.
Yeah.
And as you said, I don't think people wake up with bad intentions. I think everyone, for the most part, has decent and good intentions. And the intention is not to criticize. But these words have been around for so long and so widely used that sometimes we don't think about how it could affect a person.
Yeah.
I'll go to another example of the word disabled.
Okay.
And this is a word that is actually more common than all these three words that we've described today so far. I never looked twice on the word disabled until a little girl asked the question, why do people call me disabled? Because when a computer is disabled, it doesn't work, right? I work. And that was probably the most profound statement I have heard from an individual, not just a child, from an individual.
Yeah.
Because the words that we use matter, and we keep going back to that. But think about an individual that's functional, right? Yeah. So Layla, if someone calls her disabled, she's not going to comprehend what they just said. Sure. However, an individual that can comprehend what you're saying and looks at themselves in the mirror and says, I'm disabled. but I feel like I work.
Yeah.
I feel like I'm able to do things.
Mm-hmm.
And it starts to deteriorate their self-esteem. They start feeling like
Yeah.
maybe something is wrong with me.
Mm-hmm.
And we've seen instances, and there are articles out there about how some children and adults that are labeled certain things
Yeah.
start carrying on those labels,
Yeah.
even if they could do the complete opposite, because the world looks at me this way, so why even try?
Yeah. Yeah. No, I think that's very important. And to bring up a point, we're having this conversation, we're having this dialogue.
Mhm.
And this conversation dialogue is not to attack anybody, any
Absolutely
person,
not. No.
any group, anything. Let's start with that. I take me and you, we live, breathe, eat, sleep this community, special needs community. And even with us, we never picked up on the way that makes somebody feel, the word
Exactly.
disabled. So I said all that to say we can all learn something if we just sometimes just close our lips, open up our ears, and not be so defensive that it's an attack on my character versus I want to bring you into my world and give you a view through my eyes.
Absolutely.
If
And
we approach it like that, I think the conversation becomes easier to
productive.
have, more productive.
Hmm.
And then we're not just yelling at each other. And I think that's the case with any opposing arguments or viewpoints,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah. And you know, to touch on that, the world right now is extremely sensitive, as
Yes.
many would
Yes.
say. And it's very difficult to be able to maneuver all of these do's and don'ts in the world that we live in.
Yeah.
But when you're talking about such a fragile community,
Yeah.
the special needs community, a community that lives with disabilities, we really have to be mindful of the words and the things that we say and do. It goes miles.
Yeah.
It's just that one word could affect someone for weeks, months, years.
Yeah.
That one action could affect someone for weeks, months, years.
Yep.
And it's a single moment in time for an individual that's saying it or doing it, but it has lasting impressions
Yeah.
on the opposite side. So it's really important to think about that. And it wasn't until that statement that I heard that I have completely stopped using the word disabled.
Yeah.
And instead, I say person with disability
Yeah.
or with disability.
Yeah.
And while someone could debate me and say it's one and the same, it's really not,
It's not.
because a computer with a disability doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
But a disabled computer is
Yeah.
a computer that does not work.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's not one and the same. And like you said, that whole piece of just being mindful.
Yeah.
Because I think what it does is, and like you, and I'm not going to put words in your mouth, but I think what it did was it made you conscious
Absolutely.
of something that your intent wasn't to be offensive, but it made you conscious. And I think if anything comes from this dialogue that me and you're having is, I want people to be conscious, because when you're conscious, you can make a conscious decision. Now, you can have people to say, I don't care what you say, I'm still going to use those words and nobody's going to stop
And
me.
that's their
And that's your
choice.
right, that's your choice.
Yeah.
But now you're going to do it knowing that it's not making the person that you're doing it to feel good. You know, people want to say, well, I didn't know. Now you know.
Now you know. Now you know.
Now you know.
And this isn't just a handful of people
Yeah.
that would have the same reaction. This is a whole community
Yeah.
that would echo these same sentiments and say, please stop using these derogatory words.
Yeah.
Derogatory words.
Mm-hmm.
I'll use the last one I'll use.
Mm-hmm.
The word the crippled.
Yeah.
You know, oh, he's crippled, or they're the crippled.
Yeah.
That word, one, is just painstaking when you
Yeah.
think of the visual that comes
Yeah.
with crippled.
Mm-hmm.
People with disabilities and special needs are not crippled.
Yeah.
They have maybe
Limit.
low mobility, limited mobility,
Yep. Yep.
different abilities, diverse abilities, as we like to call it,
Mm-hmm.
but they are not crippled. When I think of crippled, I think of something that's shriveled, that is not mobile and incapable of being mobile.
Yeah.
That is not the
Yeah.
definition of people that have limited mobility.
Yeah. I think that's another word that's dated.
Yeah.
So not to age myself, not that I don't, but I grew up in the 70s, early 70s, right? 70s, 80s. And that word was very prevalent. Oh, that's the cripple boy, or oh, that's the cripple girl, and we didn't mean any harm by it, but that's all we knew,
Yeah.
you know. In order to do better, you gotta know better, you know.
Yep. And
And
it's
yeah,
less used,
yeah. Now,
but
yeah,
I have heard it.
yeah.
I have
Now,
heard it.
I trust me, I know.
And it's a word that again is diminishing and derogatory and should not be used. But in alternative to it, again, if you're referring to someone
Mm-hmm.
by saying that they're crippled,
Mm-hmm.
your intent is to say that maybe they're less mobile than others. I don't know what the intent is, and I don't agree with
Mm-hmm.
this word at all. But if that's your intent,
Yeah.
there are other ways
Yeah.
to
Describe it.
describe mobility challenges.
Limited mobility,
Yeah.
mobility challenge. And again, some people will say, "Oh, that word doesn't make sense when you're describing a person or whatever." But it's a word. It's like anything else. When you use it, the more you use it, whether it's a good word or it's a bad word, it takes on its own life. It's all what you want it to be.
Right.
And I think that's the key, and I'll keep emphasizing, if we can do anything, it's just to bring it to your attention and make you conscious that these words don't make these children, these adults, your mother, my mother, your father, my father, your loved ones, it doesn't make them feel good. So if we could just bring it to your attention and say, you know what, I'm conscious. I never knew.
Yeah.
I never knew, because again, when you don't know, you don't know. And what I've learned in my 52 years is there are things in life that I have come across that I wasn't accustomed to. I had to sit back and listen, because I may have had a preconceived idea of what it was and why it was, but until I sat back and listened, you know, it started to make sense. And then it went from me being blow it off to now I'm empathetic. And empathy, I'm not being sympathetic, I'm being empathetic, which means I get it.
You get it. You're
I
living it. Yeah.
understand. I lived it.
Yeah.
So that's all I want. Just
Right.
be empathetic. Like on one of the other episodes, it was like, be empathetic to that parent or that caregiver that on top of a bad day, they having a special needs caregiver bad day. That's
Right.
like bad day
Multiplied.
by 10,
Right. Right.
and that's not to minimize anyone else's bad day.
No.
What it's just saying is, cut me a little slack for a moment. That little piece of slack that you cut me may be the determining thing that caused me to leave my child on the doorstep.
Mm-hmm.
People don't want to think it's that serious, but it really could be that serious. And not me in general, but
Sure.
you don't know all the other things that people are going through in life, just like I don't know all the things that other people are going through. That's why I'm very conscious of how
And
I react
mindful.
and mindful
Yes.
of how I act in certain situations, that I want to flip out like everybody else, but sometimes you have to be mindful, because your last marble may be the thing that send that person over the edge,
Yep.
and nobody wants to be responsible for that. So
Exactly. Exactly.
yeah,
So I hope through this episode you gained more mindfulness
yeah,
around ways to describe, characterize, address individuals that may have special needs and disabilities in a softer, more compassionate way than using some of the more traditionally seen words that are dated,
yeah,
derogatory, or diminishing.
yeah, yeah,
Also, remember that just because we are not born with a special need or a disability does not mean that one day we will not be affected and land with a disability. So this is a world that could affect all of us at one point in time.
yeah,
I just had a conversation with an individual about 3 months ago that is an athlete and got injured and is now in a wheelchair. And overnight he's a person with a disability.
Yeah.
And it opened up his world
Mm-hmm.
in ways that he never explored before or needed to explore before. And it's moments like that, like our moment, having Leyland being exposed to that world, his moment getting injured and now being exposed to this world. It's moments like that where a lot of us may not ever get that experience,
Mm-hmm.
but taking the time to learn
Yeah.
and absorb some of the commentary and the feedback that really makes a difference for this community could go a long way.
Yeah.
So hopefully you enjoyed some of the mindfulness efforts that we put on for you today. Hopefully you can walk away with some nicer words, some more compassionate words that can be used and added to your vocabulary. And hopefully you can use this as a moment too to spread awareness and education to others. If you hear the words that we called out today or other words that you think could be categorized in the same category that we should probably steer away from, educate.
Yeah.
Be advocates, even if it's not a world that you live in specifically. Be an advocate because it could really have a lasting impact on the community.
Yeah.
So thank you for watching this episode. Remember, a new episode of Caregiving Unboxed airs every third Monday of the month. Until next time.
Yes.